Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions regarding this watch. Today, we're discussing a 2010 model year stainless steel limited edition of 1,000 pieces. From the Breitling Bentley series, this is the Supersports, named after the version of the Continental GT that produces the most power, offers the highest performance, and features the lowest weight. This watch right here is also based on the fundamental case geometries and architecture of the late 60s and 1970s big Navitimers. So while Breitling Bentley came about in 2002, the design of this watch actually harks back quite a bit further than that. Now, Breitling and Bentley, two things I like quite a bit, so I've always liked the model line, but I have to admit some of them are too big for me, and this is an example of that. So it's 48.7 millimeters in diameter in steel, 15.3, which is not terrible, but then it's 54.7 lug-to-lug and a 24 millimeter spacing between the lugs. It's really that 54.7 lug-to-lug that makes this too large for my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. And you'll appreciate that on my wrist, it is a big watch. It's not as cartoonishly outsized as I'd feared. So if your wrist is just a little bit bigger than mine, let's say 17 centimeters circumference and up, you're going to find this actually wears quite well and looks very good. Like I said, the thickness is not bad. With a sloped bezel, this will slip underneath some cuffs. It's got a great look to it, and an unusual one with this rarely seen Breitling Ocean Racer strap. So there is a Air Racer bracelet that features fully rigid manacle-like sections that include this perforation. This is a lot more flexible and easier to live with. Not only is it a little bit ventilated, but it also has several pre-scored sections. It's designed to be cut to length, and it features one of Breitling's best clasps. You can see finished inside and out, all of high polish, twin trigger release, and then internally there is a push button slider that allows you several degrees of incremental adjustment with about, I would say, 2 centimeters of adjustable incremental range right there. Taking a look at the case, it's all polished. Some people mistake this for a helium escape valve. This is actually the cover to the differential that underpins this somewhat hot-rodded version of the traditional logarithmic scale circular slide rule calculator. So this works almost in the opposite way a standard Navitimer bezel does. For example, let's say I want to multiply 5 by 3. So I put 5 over 3, and on a Navitimer, this would mean division, intuitively, the number to be divided over the number that is dividing it. But here, I put the number to be multiplied over the number multiplying it. And then I go back to the index, the 1.0 on the inner scale, and you can see 5 times 3 is 1.5. So it works like that. And I could put 4 over that. I missed the alignment a little bit. Now, what is 4 divided by 2? It's 2, just like that. So that's how it works. It's the opposite of a standard Navitimer. And I mentioned that this was a little bit of a hot rod version of the bezel. You're asking, why is there a differential? Well, watch the knurling of the outer bezel and then watch the inner scale. And particularly if you just look at where my fingers are, you can see the inner scale starts to accelerate ahead of the bezel. So that acceleration is provided by a differential, which is integral to calculation on this scale. And you can see it's a lovely look. It's a inverse panda, so silver registers on a black base. We have polished Breitling wings as well as rhodium-plated steel indices. It's a good-looking dial with nice depth. There's a little bit of a splash of red, and many famous racing chronographs have featured black, silver, white, and red. So this is a good look here. There is luminescence, so you could see it quite clearly. It does a good job of looming the bezel, not to the point that you could read it, but to make it interesting to look at. We do have a screw-down crown, as you can see on the case back. The watch is water-resistant to 100 meters, this number 190 of 1,000. It features an ETA 2892A2 automatic base with chronometer certification and a 42-hour automatic power reserve. But then there's a module on top. And the way this works is you have a coaxial set of hands, 4 of them. So you've got minutes, hours, chronograph seconds, then chronograph minutes. And chronograph minutes, like an old Lamagna movement, you can see it moves around the dial once every 60 minutes. So it's easy to read chronograph seconds and minutes. Chrono hours also present, though you don't need to reference that as often, so it's a smaller scale. And then if you look, you can see that we have what's known as a decimeter scale around the center. You're wondering, what is this 1 to 100 thing? That's called a decimeter scale. Not used much anymore, but once upon a time it was considered useful for military and scientific applications. And then finally, you can see we feature a tachymetric scale inboard of the logarithmic scale. So you can use that with the chronograph to gauge the speed of an object, such as a Bentley Supersports, over a kilometer. And finally, you'll note things like seconds and minutes and hours are calibrated. The idea being that you would use this bezel to calculate various rates and do so in the midst of a 24-hour endurance race, like the 24 hours of Le Mans, at which Bentley has won many times. So in the case back, just to go over it one more time, you have a central minute hand chrono register module over an ETA 2892A2 in chronometer spec that features hacking, quick set date, bidirectional winding, 42-hour power reserve, and a 4 Hz beat rate with 5-position adjustment. If you love this watch, reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details. And there's just a little bit more I want to mention. You can see these screws in the bezel. People always ask me, what are those? This is what's known as a captive bezel. So the screws fix the bezel to the case so it can't be popped off by an impact the way an Omega or a Tag or a Rolex bezel can. It's a very robust and somewhat more expensive way of making a bezel, but it's the way Breitling does things. And then we have this knurling on the bezel that's designed to remind you of past and present Breitling and Bentley machines. After all, the knurling started on the Bentleys and then found their way to Breitling for Bentleys. Reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.